The FIA's management of the Belgian Grand Prix received a lot of backlash from the fans and the drivers, with Verstappen visibly angry about how the race director started Sunday's event. Although rain was expected and, therefore, the majority of the drivers prepared their setups for it, the moves by the FIA have completely made the teams regret their decisions. But have the FIA gone too far with their precautionary moves to ensure the safety of the drivers? And if so, what changes can be made moving forward? If there's one thing that we absolutely despised about the Belgian Grand Prix today, it was the management by the race director. Due to severe conditions, the drivers completed the formation lap behind the safety car and parked them in the pit lane. The rain was too heavy and there was literally no visibility to drive whatsoever. But this was already planned by the teams. Rain was to be expected on Sunday, and that's why the car setups, such as the rear wings and downforce levels, had been adjusted for conditions like that. And what did the FIA do when it mattered the most? They wasted every opportunity to give us an entertaining race by waiting for the rain to fully stop and then starting the race. There was a period in between the long pause of almost 1.5 hours where we could have started racing, and with the help of the safety car and the caravan of F1 challengers behind, the water would have been cleared. Like this, we were sat for a very long period of time waiting for the rain to stop and ultimately saw all of the teams that had been set up for the rain be betrayed by the race director. It's one thing to make fun of the F1 drivers never using the wet tires and how they're the biggest waste of investment or innovation ever made in the sport, but I truly believe that in conditions like this, with tires that could clear water very efficiently, racing would have been possible despite the torrential rain. Yes, not in the spirit of it falling down massively and you're having to witness another incident of Hubert's or Van 't Hoff's nature. But rain is literally what makes the sport interesting. It's what decided championships in the past, and it's what separates the good from the bad drivers. Imagine if we never had 2024's Interlagos Grand Prix, or if we never had the legendary championship-deciding race at the same place back in 2008. I don't even want to count more races because there were just too many. But overall, rain used to be the most wanted thing by both the fans and the drivers. And slowly but surely, the FIA has turned that against our will. Even Max Verstappen wasn't happy with the direction that the race director turned the competition in after the first lap, saying, "Well, the start procedure being suspended is a bit silly. I mean, you should just run a few laps. Jesus, they are way too cautious. Now the heavy rain is coming, and then it's going to be a 3-hour delay." I think you could find the original nature as to why the FIA are being way too overcautious. You literally have deaths that happened not that long ago, 2019 for Hubert and 2023 for Van 't Hoff. The last thing you want in the sport is another death in Spa in conditions that were extremely hard to drive on. But hard is not impossible. And just because everyone was on intermediate tires, it doesn't mean that the problem was not fixable. The tractors and the water cleaners did their thing. But from the entire 1.5 hours of waiting, there was a big chunk of time in which the drivers could have driven behind the safety car and helped clear the water. That's what happened at 16:20 local time, 1 hour and 20 minutes after the original scheduled time. But this is probably not the most painful part of the race, because remember, it hasn't started at this point. Therefore, the 3-hour countdown isn't on. The worst part is that the majority of the teams had prepared for the rain that was about to come on Sunday, and the FIA just waited for the rain to stop and allowed the drivers to race. I don't think anyone was catching up with McLaren up ahead, to be fair. But Max Verstappen changed his engine and his entire rear wing just to adapt to the rainy conditions that were expected in Spa. Even Max's engineer, Simon, said that had they known they wouldn't be racing in the rain and that race direction would wait for the rain to fully stop, they would definitely not have gone with the rear wing they just went with. From this point of view, I think we need to ask some serious questions. What's going on with the FIA's measurements? Is there a red line that needs to be drawn? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about the most elite category of motorsport competition. The cars are wide enough to clean water. We've seen how fast the track dried once the rain had stopped. We've seen the world champions literally begging to race in conditions like this. We've seen tons of exciting races that happened during similar conditions. And when the rain was becoming too much, the wet tires were used in order to allow the drivers to have better grip. The governing body did a lot of work to try and motivate teams to try and use the wet tires. But all of those tries have been dropped dead in the water, pun intended, because of their inefficiency. The Spa situation is really giving us a lot to think about. How should you approach a weekend under such changing circumstances? I mean, there are tires that are supposed to clean the water out of the track with great efficiency and improve the visibility for the drivers behind. The sad part was that the grip itself wasn't the problem that affected the race delay, the visibility was. And I do believe that if the FIA went with a little bit more of a racing mode in their heads, just to put the wet tires, test the track, test the visibility and the grip, and let the drivers race, things would have been different. There is another hidden threat that these decisions from the race directors are bringing to our heads. What about Spa's future? If the weather is becoming such an important factor lately, as if this is the first and last wet race that we're going to see in Spa, will this argument be used in order to ditch the Belgian Grand Prix from the calendar? Pressures were already on. Funds and organizations have started to crumble under the pressure. And I do believe that the latest development of events orchestrated by the race directors is just too much to handle for the future of Spa. And if a legendary circuit like Spa is lost, then I assure you that the ratings of the sport are going to plummet. We've seen in Formula 2 that it could literally rain in Turn 1, but then in Turn 5 it's shiny and the conditions are for slick tires. This is where teams come alive. This is where tacticians need to bring the best out of themselves. And more importantly, this is where drivers tend to compare their talents and courage with each other. You don't have to go full throttle in Eau Rouge if it's filled with water. But with wet tires, you could do a masterpiece and still propel yourself up there. Remember, F1 is not a sport about who goes fastest at full throttle, but also about who's the smartest driver when the conditions and circumstances are against you. As you'd already imagine, the biggest problem here is that with Max Verstappen, and probably legends like Hamilton and Alonso, they've spoken loudly about how the FIA has been way too overcautious when the rain comes. And in a situation like that, their future could be decided by actions like the ones we just witnessed.